My name is Tasha. I'm a church. I'm not going to go into my bio. If you want to look at it, you can look at it in the packet. This is about community tonight. That's what's important. And today's Giving Tuesday. So definitely when it comes to this event, it's all about giving. All the people who are here, they're all giving their time, their energy, and this has been all volunteer-led. There hasn't been an organization who has endorsed or sponsored this event. These were all individuals. So we're going to get started. The first on the agenda is Miss Tiffanny Hammond. So take it away, Tiffanny.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be singing I Wish I Knew What It Would Be to Be Free by Nina Simone a cappella. Yes. Hopefully I do it justice. Okay. I wish I could know what it feels to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all that I should say. Say it loud, say it clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart. Remove all the bows that tear us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree that every man should be free. And I wish I could give all that I could give. I wish I could live how I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all that I could do. I'm not way overdue. I'm gonna start anew. And I wish I could be like the bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found out I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down to the sea. And I'd sing 'cause I know. I'd sing 'cause I know. I'd sing 'cause I know what it feels to be free.
So thank you, Ms. Hammond. You are amazing. I wanted to talk about the city for a second. We call this the city of destiny. And, you know, there's so many wonderful qualities to this city. We have the most nonprofits per capita in this city. And that to me means that every single person has a mission. That means that everybody has a passion and a drive, and that's very exciting. Jaire told me this morning that we have one of the largest populations of veterans.
There you go, come on.
We have an African-American mayor, city manager, and superintendent. So I think that alone is a lot to be proud of. We have the first innovative school district in the nation. But even with all of this, I want us to be mindful and also check ourselves, check our institutions, because the thing is that with every single institution, it has been built on a structure and a man-made social construct that needs to be broken down, dismantled, and looked at very carefully. And that's not going to just take the heads of the organizations, that's going to take every single person. So inside your packets, you actually have in the back a piece of paper as I get to it. And it's the Continuum on Becoming an Anti-Racist Multicultural Institution. This is for all of you to look at, and a chance for you to look at your own institution within, look at what environment you're working in, and dissect it and be honest. My hope is that this is a learning moment for all the organizations, institutions, and businesses, not only here in Tacoma, but everywhere. This was a really sad event. You know, it's always sad that lives are lost.
It's an old building.
That's right, it's an old building. But my hope is that something comes of that that's constructive, that's real, that takes us to a new place, a better place, and definitely a better place for our community. They call this the City of Destiny, and that's what I hope it is, what it becomes. But it's not going to happen without every single person getting involved, being mindful, being conscious, and acknowledging that racism does exist. It is alive and well, and it's alive and well in Washington. So many times we think that it's not. So recognizing that. It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, any person of color, all of us. So I wanted to lead off with a question to all of the panelists. My first question, and they'll have an opportunity to say their name, say where they're from, but the first question is the Ferguson decision. How did it impact you as an individual, and how did it impact you professionally, and your initial thoughts?
I'm going to stand up because I'm a teacher and I like to see people's eyes. So my name is Erin Jones, and I started my teaching career here in Tacoma 17 years ago. I'm now an administrator for the superintendent here in Tacoma. And I'm the mom of 3 black children, the wife of the younger brother of Jesse Jones, King 5 News. So if you ever see Jesse, you'll think of me now. Anyway, but how I think about the day after the shooting, and my 3 teenagers are 17, 18, and 19. And my daughter was headed to college a week from that time. And I'll never forget, her dad actually was involved in the first drive-by shooting here in the state of Washington. Her mom started the Hilltop Crips. So we've had a lot of history of violence in our family. And so my kids have been aware of things that they probably shouldn't have been at a really young age. And I'll never forget, we talked about it the day it happened, but the day after I found myself, I get up and play basketball every morning at 5 o'clock, and I got up at 5 o'clock and she was awake, which she never is, and she was on the computer. And she's just scrolling through all the news about the shooting, and she's sobbing. And I said, honey, what is going on for you? Because she typically doesn't follow anything in news. And she said, I'm 18. He's 18. I'm going to college next week, and he was supposed to be going to college next week. And she was just overcome. And it just reminds me as a mom, my parents are white, and I was raised in Europe. We didn't have to have these conversations there. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, but it's a different thing there. I have to have conversations with my 3 black kids that white parents don't have to have with their children. And I have two giant black boys. My youngest son is 6'4", 290. Yeah, he's kind of a big kid. Sweet as all get out. 3.7 GPA, 11 APs, highest SAT scores for a black boy in the state of Washington. Brilliant kid, but he's still 6'4", 290. And he's been pulled over by the police on his bicycle. My other son is 6'2", 240. He plays rugby at Central right now. He's been pulled over on his bicycle. Neither one of them have ever gotten in trouble, but I have to have conversations with my children about when you get pulled over, not if, but when you get pulled over, here's how I need you to interact with the police. Now understand, my baby son, the 6'4", 290 kid, also has Asperger's, and he has no filters. He's brilliant, but he can't stop talking. And no matter how many times we walk through the scenario, I have to remind him every time, you cannot talk back. And he's not a talk back in the sense that he would say something mean to a police officer, but when he's being accused of something that's unfair, he will stand up for himself, and he doesn't understand why he can't, which is a great thing in his AP class. Not so great when he's standing over a police officer. And so as a mom, as I've watched this whole situation, my heart is broken for my own children. And here's what I'll tell you. My son could go to Harvard. That his scores are good enough to go to Harvard. I won't send him to the East Coast. I can't. As a mom, I can't send my kid to the East Coast. He's going to stay here on the West Coast because I don't want to lose my son. We've worked too hard to get him here. And that's how it impacts me as a mom. But it's not just that. When I think about Tacoma, I see moms in here of kids that I've had over the last 17 years. All of these kids are in crisis. It's not just about my son. It's about the other sons and the thousands of other children in this community and others who now we have to be in fear for their lives. Can we send them away? I believe we can trust our police. In my experience, we haven't had issues. I live in Lacey, so that's where my issues have been. I hope we can trust our police not to shoot our kids here. But as I think about working in college, I work in college advising, sending kids away. How do I tell moms and dads, watch out, have this conversation with your kids. Don't just talk about what classes they need to take, but you need to sit down and talk about when you get pulled over in your car, which my daughter did in Ashland, Oregon, where she's going to college. When you get pulled over, here's how you have to have this conversation. And so as I think about as a professional, how do I take these conversations with my own personal children and extend that now to the thousands of other kids that are in the AVID classrooms that I work with to make sure that they are prepared not only academically, but for the reality that race still matters in this country.
I'm gonna stay seated just so I can see my notes. I have a laptop here. I'm not gonna stand actually, but I hope that you can hear me clearly. So my name's Chris Jordan. I'm a student at PLU, and I'm a teaching artist with the organization called Fab 5. I'm going back to when a report came out about the autopsy and how it supposedly changes everything about, whatever. And so I'm in a sculpture class right now, and since the shooting, this stuff has been going through for me. This hits home for me as a black male. And so art has been my way to process the pain that I feel as it relates to this issue. And so just processing that, dealing with the autopsy and all this controversy, I did a sculpture which is basically a pair of wax feet and a body underneath a piece of cloth on top of a metal sheet. And so what you see is the 2 feet exposed. They're black male feet. They're brown. They're my feet, actually cast and poured in wax. And the feet are sitting on this metal table, partly covered. And in class, I just talked to my classmates about the process. I didn't really say anything thematic about it. But my teacher asked the class I presented this sculpture last week. My teacher asked my classmates, about 18 other students, all white except there's one Asian girl in my class. He asked them if this hit on anything for them as related to anything happening in social media right now, anything happening in the media or in our popular culture right now, if it connected for them at all. And they had nothing to say. They shook their heads. No, they had no remarks, or nothing came to mind for them. I think we need to stop asking ourselves, what is it, like talking about this question of what does it mean to be racist? Is this racist? Am I racist? Is that racist? I see that as a privileged defense tactic. I see that as a method to try and talk down this conversation of race. And our whole conversation has been co-opted, if you're not aware of that now. We need to start talking about what it means to be anti-racist, what it means to work against this, because if you're not working against it, you are complicit in it, you're a part of it. Racism is not a matter of being, it's a matter of living. It's knowing, it's believing, it's ignoring. It's every conversation that you have not had with your children. These students, my classmates, they're not art majors. These are our doctors, these are our lawyers, these are our judges, these are our attorneys, these are our instructors, these are our educators. This is our society. And these are the children of white America today. We need to talk about race and race issues in our families. We can go to these demonstrations and we can go and we can say, we can be a part of it, right? But we need to ask ourselves, how am I demonstrating in my relationships? How am I demonstrating in my family? How am I demonstrating at my home, in my church? Who's represented in my job? Who's on my staff? Where is diversity there? Where is equity there? We need to ask ourselves, why is colonial history is the modern history of our planet? Like, why is that not addressed in our schools at every level in public school? So I just want to challenge everyone to be thinking about that and to look into their packets that Tasha handed out and really reflect on how can I be anti-racist in my job, in my family, and my work.
Hi, I'm also going to stand because I like to see people as well. My name is Nicholas Bradford. I'm the founder of an organization called the Restorative Justice Center of the Northwest. I do a lot of work around discipline, primarily in schools, and looking at kind of how we deal with harm in our communities. I've done some work as well in Pierce County with juvenile justice, and kind of done this work also in King County. And I think my first reactions, surprisingly, to seeing this event unfold on the media and also kind of on Facebook, was to completely disengage, to be perfectly honest. I was just kind of, I didn't know what to do. I see what happens is we have two opposing forces that are just so angry, right? And rightfully so, I think. And so I was thinking about my work, and in conflict we talk about, this is not about right and wrong, it's about the impact of your actions. And so thinking about to Seattle in 2010, I forget the woodcarver's name, anybody? John T. Williams. So I was reading about that recently, and the officer was, it was ruled a justified shooting, regardless of whether or not you believe that or not. That's not the issue, right? The issue was that there was some significant impact on the community and that person's family because of the actions of that officer, right? And so how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the impact of the actions and not have this adversarial, like, you're the devil kind of space? So I think about relationships, and I think about how do we build a relationship between communities of color and the police force and the other systems in place, the school systems that have really clear disproportionate effects on communities of color. So for me, I think about, this is just my first reactions was, how do we facilitate a conversation? Because this community of cops doesn't feel like they are a part of our communities. right? And I don't feel like they're a part of our communities. I have a lot of police officers who are friends. I don't find them like engaging our communities and coming to events like this. Maybe there is a police officer here. I don't know. But if we are more inviting and more able to have these conversations and address kind of what's going on in a civil way and saying, okay, these are the things that I see, and this is from Pierce County. I see a drop in youth overnight beds in detention in Pierce County, right? From around 150 8 years ago to about 25 overnight beds, right? That's a huge drop in youth that are spending the night in detention in our juvenile justice system. But what we see is, as a percentage, more African American Hispanic boys are spending more. There's a larger percentage. So we go from, and I can't remember the numbers, but we went from like 20%. There's a disproportionate effect there, and as the numbers get smaller, that percentage increases to 40 or 50 or whatever it is now. I don't know, but it increases. So we see this policy, and I'm a policy guy, so I think about like, how do we create systems that are different and going to give us the outcomes that we want, right? I'm all about decreasing the amount of overnight beds for juveniles. That's awesome. At the same time, let's address this significant issue of more African American Hispanic boys spending more time. Like there's this other outcome that we have. The same thing we have with schools. As schools put pressure to not suspend students, we see suspensions of African American Hispanic boys go up as a percentage, not as a total, but as a percentage. And we're like, what's up with that? So for me, and I'll finish, is how do we have a conversation about that and address those issues and tell communities, other communities, schools, and police forces, this is what we see and this isn't okay. What can we do to support you to address these issues that are clearly present? That's all I have.
Again, if you're just joining us, we have a handful of hashtags that we're using throughout the night. Race in Tacoma, it's all one word. We have the Ferguson decision as well, and what now? So refer to those hashtags, and Keith Blocker.
Thank you. So when I think about what were my first thoughts after hearing the Ferguson verdict, honestly, I wasn't surprised at the outcome, and that's just me being realistic and looking at how everything played out, how the grand jury was dealt with, how the gentleman Bob McCullough handled this whole situation. It just all seemed as it was leaning towards this outcome. And just thinking about the history of America and looking at the history of racism and the systematic oppression of African Americans and other people of color and throughout the country, I wasn't shocked at this outcome. With that said, it was, at the same time, it was heartbreaking. It was, here we go again, same old story. One more thug is gone. And that's the justification to take away a young man's life, is that he was considered a thug. And that's just wrong. You know, so many young people out here who just have struggles, who just need support, who need some kind of assistance that can help guide them in the right direction. But yet we want to demonize them and make the victims the enemies and make the victims the violators. And that's something that we need to address, something that we need to correct in the society, and it's something that we need to have a great dialogue about. America has a history of dehumanizing people of color. Before it was thugs, it was other things. So this whole idea that, oh, just pull your pants up is going to make everything better for the black community is just ridiculous, and it's something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't matter if your pants are up or your pants are sagging. People see you a certain way. If they have biased views, they're going to use those biased views against you. The system doesn't care about your pants being up or your pants being down. And we got to get out of that mentality to thinking that if we act a certain way, if we do things a certain way, then racism is going to go away. Racism doesn't come from people of color. Racism is a system that was designed to maintain a hierarchy, putting whites above all other people of color in America. That is the origins of racism in America, and that's the way it stands today. So this idea of reverse racism is just ridiculous. You know, it doesn't exist. You cannot create something that has an origin and somehow in the past, 40 years since the Civil Rights Movement, all of a sudden people of color are racist towards white Americans. And the fact that people of color speak out against their own struggles and their issues in their community and how oppression affects them makes them a racist, like, that's ridiculous. And it's something that we need to stand up and speak out against every time you hear these notions of reverse racism. If you look at the disparities in America, you don't see reverse racism. You see racism doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which is to create a hierarchy which allows certain people to gain access to resources in America while others don't. If you look at our school systems, if you look at our prison systems, if you look at our healthcare systems, all these things show great disparities that affect people of color. And that hasn't changed in the past 40 years or 100 years. So it may look different, but the outcomes and the results have maintained the same. And that's something that we need to talk about. That's something that we need to talk within our families about. That's something that we need to talk at work about. And you gotta lean into these conversations. These conversations bring up a whole lot of emotions. And that's just the reality. But at the same time, it's something that we need to address, and it's something that we need to have a dialogue about. So again, when I think about this verdict, you know, it was a tragedy, but we can make this tragedy something bigger and something better by creating movements and continuing events and programs like this. Tonight is a city council meeting, you know, but we're here, you know. But if you think about Ferguson and the ratio of city council people of color on the city council, all but one is a person of color. So you have a city that is set up where the dominant culture, even though they're a minority, they still control everything politically. Bob McCullough was a political candidate. He was someone who ran for office. He continues to run for office unopposed in his community. And that's something that needs to be addressed. So when I think about my career, my future in Tacoma, I'm thinking politics. I'm thinking of getting engaged in this system. I'm thinking stepping up and inspiring others to step up. This is our right, and we can do that, and we don't have to wait for people to tell us we can. So thank you.
Hello, my name's Jasmyn Jefferson. I'm a parent. I don't have a background in nonprofit. I work in the private sector. My feelings on the Ferguson verdict, I think, are echoed. I wasn't surprised. A lot of talking took place in my household. I have a daughter, she's grown. Talked to my brothers, my dad, talked to my daughter about her brothers. A lot of weeping by myself. I was at a real estate conference. I sell houses. And I went to a forum that talked about the state of housing in Black America. There was a leader from the St. Louis community that attended that meeting. And she stood up and she asked this panel for help. She said Ferguson needed help, St. Louis needed help. She said that the decision had already come down, and this was 3 weeks ago, and that before it was made public, she needed to know what to do with her community. So being in that environment, it made me even more distrustful. I don't know if that was a fact. I don't know if it was a miscomment, but it made me really think about how much that situation just feeds into the distrust. And a lot of what we were hearing about their dysfunction, I could see here in Tacoma. The reason that I'm here is because I love my daughter. I love my people and my family. I love the people in my community. Like I said, I'm not an activist by choice, but I feel like the peers that I am with, there is a lot of us who want to make a difference, and it is my obligation to continue to insert myself into the community, whether people want to shut me down, whether people want to stop me. There are back doors, I'll climb through a window. So I'm hoping that in what people take away from this, what I have to say, that it will be an inspiration, an empowerment to the young people. I'm so happy to see so many young people here. I wish my daughter can be here. She's in Italy. I would take a selfie, but it seems a little, strange to do that, so I'll just take pictures of you guys later. So what I do hope is to have more people engaged. If you don't know where to get started, it really is not that difficult. Standing in the shadows is not helping anyone, so that's why I'm doing this for the first time, and I want to thank Tasha for doing this. The legacy that I want to leave my daughter is at risk of just being normal. If I want her to be remarkable, I have to be remarkable. So that's why I'm here today.
Hi, my name's Kit Evans. And when Tasha asked me, I said yes, because that's what I was taught. My biggest fear initially, do I talk down into it? Yes, my biggest fear initially was I would say some stupid white thing. I'm serious. But of course, I reminded myself, well, I am white, that's how I identify. And I have been known to say stupid things. So I needed to get over that. One of the ways I got over that was I thought about my boys, and I'm pretty sure they will come home tonight. And so I thought, well, my fears are relatively unimportant. And I too, I want to stand up. I want to insert myself, and I want to be there. What I thought when I heard the verdict was I was in a rage, because every 15 minutes from 4 p.m. their time on, I flipped to HuffPost or something, trying to find, what's the verdict, what's the verdict? And I thought, these people with their machinations, they've got some insane plan to postpone this verdict in some way. I mean, I just got madder and madder, because I know the system pretty well, and it didn't surprise me, but it just made me nuts. I don't know what I felt after that, after hearing the verdict. And what did they, at 9 o'clock at night or something, what are they up to? That was just the tip of the iceberg, what they were up to back there, and what they're up to everywhere. And so my second greatest fear I took to my staff, and I said, I'm afraid to go talk tonight, because there's a word in my mind that I can't get out of my mind, and that word is genocide. And I can't go to this room full of people and not be harmonious. And they just said, well, do you think it's true? And I said, yes, I think it's true. And they said, well, then talk about it. So I guess I'll say what I feel, which is that the Native Americans, it's very clear it's been genocide. There's almost none of the tribes left that were here when white people got here. And I have to say also the Spanish, wiped out most of California. But and it's very clear when you look at what has happened to Native Americans and continues to happen to them today. It's horrifying. But as I was thinking about that, I thought about African Americans, and I started connecting the dots. And it may look somewhat different, but the complete disruption of the economic basis, the ability to put together a home, a job, a household, over and over, African Americans have built that, and over the system has taken it away from them again and again. If you haven't read The Atlantic, the article on Reparations, the case for reparations, it's brilliant. You must read it if you're going to be alive to what's really going on in the deeper levels of things. It's online, it's free. It says on the cover, 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of state-sanctioned redlining, until we reckon with the compounding moral debts of our ancestors, America will never be whole. I saw the cover of that magazine in the grocery store, and I said, I'm not going to read that somebody's going to want my money. No, seriously, I have to be honest. I don't have enough money. America does not have enough money to make this economic wholeness happen. That's what I thought. So why read it? But I forgot that I subscribed to the dang magazine. And it came to my house, and I'm going like, well, all right. It's written like a story because it is a story, and it's something that you can read all the way through, but you keep stopping to cry. You keep stopping to cry. There's no way around it. So I urge you to read that. I believe that genocide does not always include the mass incarceration. It does include in this case, but the wholesale murder of everyone. But it's like the drops on the forehead of Chinese torture. That's not the same as immediate drowning someone. But after a while, they go crazy. Don't we all think we're crazy when we hear this stuff? We're going like, that can't be so. Drop, drop, drop. Oh, it is so. Drop, drop. Yes, it's so. And at some point, people burn their own buildings. One of my staff said to me, when I complained, the first white person I talked to, I said, what do you think of Ferguson? They looked at me in complete innocence, open face, and said, well, I don't understand. Why are they burning down their own buildings? And I just looked at this person. And my staff person, my youngest staff person, when I said, what do I do with questions like that? She said, remind them of self-immolation. Remind people what you do when you're completely out of options and your rage makes your head want to blow up. So I just wanted to bring out that there's something deeper going on. I don't think the word racism can encompass what's happening in America today. I really don't think that's a big enough word. It's a convenient word to talk about, oh, we have this problem and that's what we'll call it. And we can have classes on diversity to do something about it. We have public policies and laws that are demeaning, that are cruel. Oh, the little cruelties make me nuts. And those are on the books, and they continue to debase and degrade and destabilize a huge part of our population. And we have deep, deep work to do. And part of that's going to be recognizing in each other and understanding the truth of this. So I've got some pieces of paper back there on the cheese table. I've got 4 things on there that I think are great references, and I put down the links and stuff because I don't have like a PowerPoint to show that kind of stuff. There's things to read that there are lots of people thinking about this, and lots of people have information. And for every white person in the room, I don't know all of you, so many of you are probably well more informed than I am. I know Carolyn is. But our first responsibility is to get informed. And maybe that's true for everyone in the room. We have got to be informed, and then we have got to be accountable. Those are the 2 things I believe. So I'm grateful for you being here, and thanks for the shout out on my birthday. I'd like to give a shout out. If you don't know what to do next, call Tasha.
Hi, I'm Troy Christensen. I'm Chief of Operations and Strategy at the Metropolitan Development Council, just a block up the street. Is Philip Cowan in the room somewhere? I know he's our host. Okay. I just wanted to thank the Grand Cinema for hosting this event and to ask... And given that there's so many people in the room, to ask Philip if a white fire marshal comes in to keep him out till we're done. My first reaction, I don't know if any of you went on the New York Times website, but they actually list practically everything from the trial, or I guess it's not really a trial, from the indictment hearings. And First off, so the question is, what's our personal reaction? My personal reaction, and I'm not an attorney, but I thought, why did they go for an indictment instead of charges? Secondly, the prosecutor's supposed to prosecute, and they set it up from the beginning so that they were going to get this verdict. He didn't even say, I need you to indict him. He just said, I know you'll do the right thing. If you look at his questioning of the people, and maybe all of you know this already, but the way he questioned the witnesses, he treated them as hostile, and he handled the officer with kid gloves. And that's not what a prosecutor's supposed to do. By definition, it's an adversarial system, and the prosecutor is supposed to prosecute. So there was this, in my opinion, there was a second crime committed, and someone should be held accountable for that. I appreciate what Erin says. I know parents of color do this, and I don't know where the victim's parents were on guiding him about, what to do in the face of a white police officer, especially if you're a large black man. And I get it that, I never had to think about that. I didn't have to tell my children about that. Kate doesn't have to worry that her kids aren't going to come home tonight for that reason. Erin does. She has to. Every black person in this community, in this country, has to do that with their kids. That's because of the way the system is. It's not because of individual racism, although I'm sure that's there as well, but it's because of a larger systemic system of racism. It's like giving socks to a person who's homeless. You tell your kids, be careful if the police approach you, but it doesn't fix the problem. Socks don't actually make a person not homeless. Teaching your kids how to not get shot by the police doesn't change the system. It's a necessary requirement right now, but really what we need is change. And change probably isn't going to happen with the choir together in a room having a dialogue. It may build us some energy, but what we need are leaders of color and white leaders in this community to come together and say we have to have some changes in policy around law enforcement, around education, around health care, around criminalization, around criminal justice. And we need to do that all across this country. Having dialogue to help people understand what's right and wrong hasn't worked. It doesn't work. It didn't work with slavery. It didn't work with civil rights. It actually took laws changing that forced things to happen that then resulted in people's thinking beginning to change over time. So I really think that we have an opportunity here for a call for action that says we need to actually work for some systemic change. I know the city of, we're ripe for it in this community. As Tasha said, we have a black mayor, a black city manager, a black superintendent, people of color on the council. We need to be able to, now is the time for us to step up and say, we need to make change. They've just created at the city of Tacoma a Department of Equity and Human Rights. That didn't exist before. There's a reason that they're doing that, and it has to do with more and more leaders at the city understanding that this is an issue for our community and an issue that requires change. And it's up to us as a community and us as leaders to pull together and demand that change, because it won't happen without demanding it. Thank you.
And on that note, talking about community leaders, there are many community leaders who wanted to make statements. So inside your packet, there are community leaders' statements, and then also at tashainachurch.com, as said, I have all of this information is actually on there electronically, and all of the full statements will be in there as well. I'd like to hand this off to Jaire Winesberry, definitely another amazing man in this community and a leader, and take it away, Jaire.
Thank you. Y'all give Tasha a hand. Come on. I'm 100% proud to be from Tacoma, born and raised. If you're from Tacoma, go ahead and raise your hand, please. All right. As a black male, I haven't had to deal with some of the issues that my brothers and sisters had to on either the East Coast or the South. I'm born and raised in Steilacoom, Washington. The only gunshots I heard growing up was from Fort Lewis. All right. But other than that, if you know 10 people, raise your hand. If you know 10 or more people, raise your hand. Just go ahead and raise your hand. 10. If you know 10 or more people, raise your hand. All right, the reason why I said this is because it's an exponential effect. All right, now if you tell 10 people, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, and all those 10 people are with you, and you guys go out in charge and do something, technically that's enough to make a game changer. That's enough to change the world, really. What's boiled down to is that it's two kinds of people who have purpose and people who don't. The people who have purpose in a negative way are perpetuating, what they need. They're supporting all they're giving information, they're passing laws, and they're creating a system that supports them. A close individual in my life, Sophia, she is actually a lawyer, and she referenced a story that I think a lot of us have read. And black people, we can talk about this all day until the cows come home. But what it boils down to is in To Kill a Mockingbird, there was an individual, his name was Atticus Finch. And that what it boils down to is that we don't necessarily need a whole bunch of lawyers doing our job. We need the right people to help us. And the right people, I'm not trying to rhyme it, but the right people, in this case, are white people. All right, what it's boiled down to is that there's some people who don't think that, racism exists. There's some people who don't think that there's inequality. And some of these individuals you may be friends with. I'm friends with a lot of people where I'm actually the only black guy they know. So yes, do I feel like I have to represent a whole nation sometimes? Yes. A whole culture sometimes? Yes. But that doesn't excuse anyone from doing what they can do. And we all have different levels that we can operate on, but we all have different platforms that we've created for ourselves. And if we take it upon ourselves to see what we can do within our own innate ability, as well as the support of our friends or family around us, we can actually make something happen, and it wouldn't just be all talk. So again, if we're not out there really talking to our politicians, first of all, if you're not registered to vote, you shouldn't even be talking, all right? Get registered to vote. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, purple, blue, it doesn't matter. Go out there and vote for the things that you believe in. So with that said, we've heard a lot of talks about people's reaction. The next question, we're going to kind of change the tone a little bit. We can always talk about the problem, but my background is in life coaching, and you always have to ask yourself those great questions. There's always the answer within the question. So the question really is now, what does better look like? What does better look like? And through that process, figure out what does it take to get there, but what does better look like? Starting with Erin.
So I am a transplant, and I'm all wound up here. My husband was raised in Tacoma, and we moved here when my son was 2 months old, so we've been here almost 18 years, and I love Tacoma. Love Tacoma. What does better look like? Better looks like talking about each of our children as if they're gifts and as if they're gifted. And as an educator, as an administrator in the school district, my number one charge, I feel like, is to get every single administrator, every single teacher in a classroom, every paraeducator, every security guard to see every single child as gifted. And that is, it's powerful, because when you can see kids as gifted, you raise your standard for them. And it changes how you instruct them. It changes how you interact with them. And so when I think about the students that I've had in my 23 years of teaching now, I have two gangbangers, actually two former gangbangers, who one just graduated from Whitworth on a full-ride scholarship. The other is an officer in the Navy. And I think about part of the reason they were able to do that is not because they've always been brilliant. Both of those boys have always been brilliant. They've always been gifted. But it was somebody telling them, hey, here's a mirror. You're gifted. You're brilliant. And they bought into that. But I think too many educators say, oh, it's those kids. They live in those apartments or that neighborhood. And that discourse has to change, and that's part of my role as an administrator is at that level, as I'm in buildings, challenging educators and saying, you know what, if you can't believe that every single child can learn, you probably need another job. You need to be doing something else. I wrote an essay 7 years ago, and it's called Children Are Dying All Around Me, and here I sit in professional development. And those of you who are teachers can understand, you may be able to relate to that. You know, we sit in all kinds of PD, and we go and learn, and I'm a trainer. I train across the country in cultural competence, but here's what I believe. I believe kids are dying every day in our schools. I believe dropout is actually push out, and I believe it begins the first day of kindergarten. And so what does better look like? Better looks like acknowledging that and actually changing what we're doing. Not asking the kids to change, but us as a system saying, you know what, we're in crisis. Let's not wait till we have a riot. By the way, there is a riot right now. By the way, kids are dying in droves. By the way, lots of our black boys are being locked up. And I was just telling Chris, we're like one of the top 5 states in the nation, percentage-wise, for incarcerating black men. Yet we're only 6% of the population here. But that starts in public school. It starts when kids are expelled. In a district I was in recently, we had a 5-year-old expelled. How do you expel a kindergartner? How do we make things better? We change how we talk about our young people. We talk about them in the asset-based language and not deficit. We stop using words like minority and dropout and achievement gap. And we talk about how do we hold ourselves as a system accountable. And so I think I'm in my favorite role right now. I love teaching. And so today I was in a classroom teaching. As an administrator, I believe in leading from the ground. I don't believe in telling people what I'm not willing to do. And so I teach. I work at CAB. Well, I try not to be at CAB. Central office, I try not to be there. So people can never find me in my office. But I try to commit to teaching in classrooms at least once a week. And I believe that as a black woman, I have a responsibility to be that model. I wear my hair natural because I want every little black girl to say, you know what? I can be my kind of beautiful. And I can be powerful. I can be in leadership. And I really don't say that to toot my own horn. I say it because I see how important that is. My son, who's a senior this year, came home at the end of his sophomore year, and he said, Mom, I'm just not black enough. I'm just not black enough. And I'm like, what the heck is that about? You got 2 black parents. What is that about? And he said, I don't sing rap. Like, you know, I don't sing hip hop and stuff like Malachi, and I'm not a football player. I'm not a basketball player. I'm kind of nerdy. And he is very nerdy. When you take 11 AP classes, you got to be kind of nerdy, regardless of color. And but he came back the first day of his junior year. And he was all smiles the first day of school. And he's like, oh, my gosh, Mom, guess what? And I said, what, honey? Because he's got Asperger's. He doesn't usually show emotion, but he was showing some emotion. And he said, I have a black history teacher. My AP history teacher's black, and he's nerdy. I guess I'm black enough, Mom. And I think about, what does that mean for us now? It's something that was already said. We need to have more black folks, Latino men, in our classrooms, modeling for our young people, here's what's possible. We have to do that. And that means for you, those of you who are young people out here, we need you to become teachers. And please come talk to me if you're at all interested. It doesn't pay well, but I will tell you, the rewards are never ending, and it's totally worth it to change a life. And if each of us could just reach one, and this is why I became a teacher. I was going to be a lawyer and go work back in Europe, where I'm from, at the United Nations. And when I got to America, I said, you know, if I can just reach one kid, and then he can reach one kid, and then he can reach one kid, I can change the world. So if each one of us could change our own little world, imagine what could be for Tacoma.
You may have to stand up this time.
Stand up. I made myself somewhat of a little teleprompter so that I can remember my notes. So that's how this works. I'm gonna stand on top of what you said, and that's when we talk about. To me, I'm gonna address white America and allyship. There's a Chris Rock quote that's really interesting. He talks about this notion of that black people have made progress in this country. And what he says is that black people haven't made progress. Like, this has not been black progress. Having Obama as the president is not black progress. Like, white people have made progress. Black people are not the source of racism. Black people have not been the problem. There have always been black people who have been eligible for presidential candidacy and for all of this leadership at every level. There's black people who have been eligible to be mayors for generations in the city of Tacoma, like all of that. White people have made progress. What I say to that, though, is that it's time to dig deeper. If we look at this as a measurement of the progress that you've made, it hasn't been enough. Mike Brown is dead. That progress wasn't enough for him. Allyship, I'm so sorry. Solidarity is not like your Facebook profile picture. Solidarity is embracing the pain. It's embracing the pain. If you're not feeling the pain of this and you are ignoring it, you are not checking your privilege, you are not addressing it, you're not digging deeply enough. It's embracing the pain, and it's taking action that has a cost. That means taking assets that you have and placing them outside of yourself. That's a matter of investment of time, energy, resources. That's a matter of checking your institutions, checking your relationships. How are you demonstrating your families? Once again, police need body cameras, like in the city of Tacoma, like that's just something we do. That meeting that you're talking about, I'm gonna be there. Like we need to make this happen. But this is deeper. I mean, the laws are one thing, right? But our lifestyles is the issue. Every day, every conversation that we ignore, this continues to live on. It goes further. So I say to you, check your privilege, embrace the pain, because embracing that pain and carrying forward and moving forward has been the only way that anyone has ever found hope. So that's what I say to you, just like the progress, like I'm happy that I live now and not before, but that's not enough. And I ask you to find ways that you can do more.
So thinking about hope and what I see moving forward and that kind of thing. In the line of quotes, there's a quote from Black Star, Talib Kweli and Mos Def. Says, "I'm not compassionate, I'm just well-behaved." And we talk a lot about accountability and lawyers, and I come from a little bit different kind of perspective on the fact that like it is important for us to work together. This is a community. Tacoma's a community. Pierce County's a community. Things aren't going to change if I come at them. I can't get peace through the end of a gun, nor at the end of a rock or whatever. And so, how do we make that happen? And compassion for me is in the face of really significant harm and conflict. How do we deal with that? And think about like your experience when you're in conflict with somebody that you love, right? Your family, friends, even your coworkers. Like when conflict happens and it's emotional, it's intense, and it feels raw. And this is, I mean, what happened is on a totally different level than what we experience on a daily basis. But when you deal with conflict in an emotional, when you deal with that conflict with people that you love, you do it differently, right? You just you want to understand where they're at, where they're coming from. You want to be understood, right? And that's what I see these two groups of people doing, right? Our communities of color, police officers, they're just in conflict and they want to be understood. But the way they're communicating is not conducive to that, right? So how do we have a meaningful conversation? that engages that, and we can. And so I think, thinking about hope, there are systems in place around the world that are doing this work. And in the United States, there are people and communities that do this work, whether it's in schools, or whether it's in juvenile justice, or the justice systems at large. But thinking about accountability as I am going to hold you accountable for your actions is different than let's hold us accountable for our actions. That's just qualitatively different, and it comes from a place of compassion and love that this other system, this adversarial system, this guilt-to-innocent system doesn't have the flexibility or capacity to address. So it's not about right and wrong and laws and that kind of thing. It's about impact of actions and how my actions impact you. I need to be accountable for that, whether or not it was against the law.
So what is better? What is a better Tacoma? And as I sit here and think about that, what kind of city do I want to see for the next generations? And it makes me think, we talk a lot about diversity and issues dealing with equity. And one thing that comes to mind is when I first moved to Tacoma, I tried to get involved really quickly, and I started participating with the YMCA. The YMCA had a program called the Black Achievers Program. And it was designed to help black children get education opportunities, and who are interested in taking advantage of these opportunities to be successful in school. The Black Achievers Program was then turned into the multicultural program, and then a year later, there's no more black children in the program. Okay, one example. The College Success Foundation created a HERO program that was designed to help black males get access to scholarships from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Because after 10 years, it was a 10-year scholarship, but 6 years in, they started to realize, wait a minute, no black males are applying for the scholarship. Why? So they created the HERO program. A few years later, the HERO program is now for all children. Again, you have now it's gone. Again, the city of Tacoma, School District 10, had the Black Male Learning Project. After a couple years, you kind of know where I'm going with this, right? It was turned into the Multicultural, or the Students of Color Learning Project. So it's, again, being watered down. And I say all that to say, when you start talking about the problems, from my perspective and from my experience, it's been the black males have the highest dropout rates, highest gang activities, least likely to go to college. But again, when you start talking about resources to address these issues and help young people move forward, young people, we're talking about children now, the resources get taken away for the sake of all children. But apparently all children aren't the problem. So when we could get to a point, and it's a culture of this inside of the state of Washington. State of Washington took away affirmative action, another resource that was designed to help people of color gain access to resources, taken away. So a better Tacoma to me, a better Washington state to me, is an equitable Washington state. It's an equitable Tacoma, where we recognize that if there are problems and we are able to identify a particular group that is the main cause of the problem, when are we going to allocate the resources to address these issues? Where is the uproar when this happens? You know, and it happens and no one says nothing. Maybe a few people step up and say what's going on, but then the resources are taken away, and the students who are the problem students are back to square one again. So we need to step up and, again, don't get fooled by this whole notion of reverse racism. It's not a reality. People of color can be angry with white people. People of color can be untrustworthy. People of color can discriminate. People of color can be prejudiced. That does not equate to racism. Racism is the allocation of resources. Who deserves what? Who gets to be where? Who gets to travel on their bicycle without being pulled over by police officers? Those are the issues that we're talking about. And until we start becoming honest with ourselves and really starting to do some self-reflection and think about our own actions and the part that we play, there will be no better Tacoma.
So the question of what better looks like, to me, the acknowledgement that there's always room for improvement, that is, right now with the spotlight being on the deep-rooted distrust of the people who are supposed to serve and protect us, we do have the opportunity, as our population grows, to start looking towards the future of how we are going to plan to handle that. Are we ready as a county for 1 million+ people? Right now, I don't think that we are. Our current leadership, they need to cut it out with the crabs in the barrel mentality. Just because some of us don't fit into that box does not mean that we are incapable of being leaders. It is okay to let other people's perspectives, it is okay to let other people's work be a part of what you're doing. You do not have to be the end-all, be-all of how this city is led. Obviously, better looks like people stopping with the ignorant comments on Facebook. You know, it's very disheartening. But then again, I had to ask myself, was my head stuck in the sand? Did I really think these people did not exist? But it was a rude awakening. It was something I saw on Twitter. I'm sure a lot of you saw we had a community friend who was reposting a lot of what was being said. And it was a reminder that we do need to do better. We do need to be active. So pardon me being nervous. We need to, I'm not done, hold on. They threw me off with the questions. They're not in the same order, and I'm very organized when it comes to that. Oh, the schools. So, Tacoma schools. I went to just Tacoma schools. My daughter graduated from Tacoma schools. She is the first of her parents to graduate. We don't have Erin Jones at all of our schools. Luckily, we have her in the umbrella. But what needs to happen is when you do have a group of students, when these groups are dismantled, if they want to have a leadership organization, and I'm speaking to the educators and the parents, we have to let the students do these things, because if not, we're diminishing their passion before they even have a chance for it to flourish. If they want to have a black student movement, they should be able to do that. It should not be questioned by administration. Why do you need that? Why do you think that needs to happen? You have a group of 10 to 15 young ladies who are telling you this is what they want in their school. They should be allowed to do that. I am not aware that there are any functioning black student movements in our Tacoma high schools. If there is, I'm very happy. There should be one in every school, because every other group is represented by their student leadership. You know, looking forward to what looks better with law enforcement, I don't have a pulse on that. I'm a retired juvenile delinquent. So my capacity with law enforcement now is in a volunteer realm. So what that does for me is it puts me in front of law enforcement. And I think that that's important. Yesterday we did a First Responders Day. I have very conflicting feelings about going into the prosecuting attorney's office. There were some things that were done here in Tacoma a couple years ago that disrupted our community. But I have an opportunity to say something. I have his full undivided attention. I am in front of the sheriff. He is telling me that there are children being pulled out of homes in dangerous situations that need things. I get the opportunity to go in and see their cabinet of stuff that the kids need. And what do I see that's missing? Something as simple as hair care products. They don't know. So it's our job while we're out doing these things. If you see something, you have to speak up about it. And it's those little things, the compound effect. My observations are not as great as the people doing this wonderful work, but the little things, if you feel overwhelmed by going and taking over the school district or, some of these nonprofit organizations that do tremendously great work, I just want you to know there is room for everybody to make a difference, and that compound effect is immeasurable.
Well, My Better Tacoma looks like Erin, Amanda Scott Thomas, and Carla Santorno running the school district for about another decade. Please, please, please get this stuff moved into, and it also includes Keith running and being elected to office. And then for white people in Tacoma, it looks to me like people who actually will go out and read like 4 things a year. People who will actually go ahead and find out and do some self-reflection. It's going and joining groups and doing things without self-reflecting, without self-educating. When I was in Alaska, I was a raging feminist, and it was a lot of fun. So, rage on for civil rights. But a group of men invited me to come to their meeting. This was a sort of a men's consciousness-raising group, I think. And they wanted me to come talk to them about women and what women want in the women's movement and domestic violence and those things. And so it took me 2 loads from my car, these books with me. And when I sat down in my chair, they were as high as my chair. And I gave these men about 5 minutes. And I said, thank you for inviting me. The impulse is correct. But the order in which you've done this is wrong. You need to educate yourselves first and then ask me for my time. So this is my call to white people, is educate yourselves. We can educate each other. We can reach out. We can help each other and share things. We can sit down. I'll tell you, Pastor John Stroh and several other people started something in this community. It only happened once, but it changed my life. And what they had was they had 6 weeks of conversations about race. And there were a group of Native Americans, and this is self-identified, and a group of white people and African American people. We met all together for 4 weeks. We talked about some really amazing stuff. Then we separated out into our groups. I'd never sat with a group of white people and talked about what does it mean to be white and how, what are we up to? It was a huge, huge eye-opener. And then we read that Unpacking Your Backpack, on racism that woman wrote. And there's this list of questions you're supposed to answer. And one of the questions is, have you ever walked into a drugstore and not found a Band-Aid the color of your skin? Blew my mind. I thought, oh, that's what they're talking about, the small things. That's what it's about. So that self-education. A good Tacoma would look like people being really accountable to each other, not by asking you to come tell me how it is, but me going to find out everything I can and then coming to you and say, am I making progress here? Can you talk to me? And the last thing I'll say is that when we're in a room and somebody says things that I'm glad there's nobody of color in the room because of what was just said, speak up. We have got to speak up.
Okay, so I know we're short on time, so I'll try and make this brief. Hey, Kim. Earlier this year, I was sitting in with a large group of people who were basically advising the city of Tacoma on their human services plan. they'd brought in this 2 white facilitators that were facilitating the group. It was a very diverse group of people. They brought up a particular topic. I don't even remember what the topic was, but 3 people of color spoke up and said, wait a minute, we have some concerns about the direction that this is going. And then one of the white facilitators basically said, okay, well, we appreciate your comments and we'll note them, but we need to move on. And so I leaned over to an African-American woman sitting next to me and said, did you catch that? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, why don't you say something? And she said, well, why don't you use your white privilege and say something? So I did. But I think that, and a lot of my, friends who are people of color will say, I'm so tired of always being the one that has to speak up, always being the one that has to educate, always being the one that says, this isn't right, or did you notice this? Because most of the time I don't say anything, and I don't even know if the white people in the room notice. So I think that the white, if there's a better Tacoma, white people are doing this way more often, and they're speaking up because they're saying, even though this may not be in my interests, I need to speak up because I see it's wrong. And really, if they understood the greater universe, it's obviously in their interest too, because what the privilege that I get as a white person harms me as much as being held down does to people of color. And for white people to understand that and the humanity that's associated with that is huge. So I think if more people can understand that, more white people speak up, we can use this opportunity to continue to take on the school district, take on law enforcement, take on criminal justice, take on healthcare, and make sure that the disparities that we see are lessened, decreased. I'll just throw out one statistic because I've been working in homelessness for a number of years, and for white people, when they hear this statistic, they look really confused, like they don't understand it. African Americans represent 7% of Pierce County's population. They represent 28% of those in Pierce County living in poverty, and 35% of those experiencing homelessness. And if that's not institutional racism that shows up in real life disparity with the things that matter most, like being able to care for your family and being able to get a good night's sleep, I don't know what is. And so for people to continue to say that it doesn't exist, we need to make sure that it's in their face as often as it needs to be till they have an aha moment.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, all of the panelists, for all of your answers to all the questions. We are going to be moving forward, and we're tweaking the agenda a little bit. We have a guest who I asked to come in and speak. He's an amazing man, not only just to this community, but on a personal note, and he's blushing back there. I see it. But he's definitely someone who has inspired me, challenged me, questioned me, made me question myself. And all of those things are great, and they're needed. And they're needed for more than just me. They're needed for all the people in this community. So I have asked Dr. Dexter Gordon from Race and Pedagogy to come and speak. Now, when he is speaking, I did have an activity up here, but I wanted to combine this. So everybody has Post-it notes. If you don't have Post-it notes, we have Post-it notes up here. We have pens for everyone. And while he's doing his speech, I just wanted you to take a moment and think on what the panelists have said, what Dr. Dexter Gordon is saying, and any thoughts that come to mind. I would like you to write those down. At the end of this whole event, we're going to have all of those Post-it notes up here. We're going to take a picture of it. And so it's another way for us to just carry on the conversation, but then also share with other people who you might not be sitting next to. So it's an opportunity for others to hear your thoughts as well. So thank you, and Dr. Dexter Gordon, thank you so much for coming. He was ill, and he still made the trip, so thank you very much.
I've not been out in the streets with all the demonstrations because I've been on my back ill. That's the only reason that I have not been out with every effort to bring attention to this injustice in our nation. Tasha says I was back there blushing. I was actually wincing because she announced me and my wife leveled her elbow into my ribs and said, "Short." I don't know how she expects me to do something like that. I've been away from this. I've been sick. So I'm longing to get back into this. So I'm so sorry about this short issue. Afterwards. Okay. All right. So because I want to be welcomed back home tonight, I will go for the short thing. I want to make some remarks, and then I want to read some of what I've written here. Maybe I should read first, because the remarks I want to make are about my life in Tacoma. And that's where I want to end. You've read a short version of the statement from the Race and Pedagogy Institute at the University of Puget Sound on the killing of Michael Brown and the lack of indictment by the grand jury. I'll just read a couple of pages and then make some comments. The Race and Pedagogy Institute notes with deep sadness, first the killing of Michael Brown, and then the decision of the grand jury not to indict Officer Darren Wilson for this act. While we respect the grand jury, we are outraged at the manipulation of the process by St. Louis County Prosecutor Robert McCullough to bring about this predictable result of no indictment. Prosecutor McCullough acted in the name of justice, but the scales were clearly tipped in favor of Officer Wilson. Prosecutor McCullough, who faced calls to recuse himself on account of his documented bias in favor of police officers, as well as his personal history that cast doubt on his ability to be fair in this case, not only refused to recuse himself, but by his action in the proceedings, he forever cast doubt on the fairness of the process. In order for us to continue in good faith to encourage respect for the decisions made by our courts, we must insist that they and our entire criminal justice system work in concert to ensure equal justice under law for all. African Americans continue to believe that the criminal justice system was not designed to serve and protect them. Sadly, this perspective finds its basis in the historical practice of the unequal dispensing of justice across the nation. Such findings were reported by the Kerner Commission in 1968. and they are supported by the several reports by the Sentencing Project and studies like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Douglas Blackman's Slavery by Another Name, and David Wilson's Inventing Black on Black Violence. Of course, the developments in Ferguson since August 9, 2014, with the shooting and subsequent treatment of Michael Brown and those who call for justice in his name, only serve to confirm the continued existence of this problem. The killing of young black men by law enforcement officers in this country must stop. It is an outrage to note the number of young black men killed by the police in the last 4 months of 2014 alone. Since the killing of Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Ezell Ford, and Omar Abrego have been added to this macabre list. Young black men killed by the police. We are in agreement with other agencies, including the Yale Black Law Students Association, that both state and federal laws on use of force by police officials almost ensures continued legally sanctioned slaughter. We therefore support the call for a review of state and local procedures for subduing alleged assailants, and that force equivalent to the threat should be employed against unarmed suspects. We also affirm the priority of the safety of police officers. Additionally, we must reduce justifiable homicide by raising the justification standard above that of police feeling threatened. We strongly believe that justice is the basis upon which a society must seek peace and equality. So, for those people who are calling for peace, I say to you, you cannot in good faith call for peace without a foundation of justice. We must denounce the tainted method applied in the Michael Brown case, as it ensures that we will never get to the truth. In so doing, we stand with the National Bar Association, the ACLU of Missouri, the Yale Black Law Students Association, and other organizations voicing similar concerns. Racism has no place in our legal system, and we have a duty to ensure that it is eliminated from every facet of our system and our society. Tacoma has its own history of challenging race relations and strained relationships between law enforcement and the community. We therefore recommend that, like the rest of the nation, Tacoma must take note of the lessons from Ferguson. And the way I think of Tacoma is, I think Mike Brown did not dodge a bullet, but every time Tacoma thinks of Ferguson, Tacoma should say, Tacoma has dodged a bullet. Tacoma's criminal justice establishment, including the bench, the district attorney's office, and the police, should take note that representation matters. Therefore, a criminal justice establishment that does not look anything like the community it serves is asking for trouble, no matter how dedicated and professional its employees. And I've heard that from the DA's office again and again when we raise this question. Based on documented best practices elsewhere, we recommend that the Tacoma Police Department be guided by some of the following. And I simply pulled this from the case of Richmond, California, that has all but eliminated police killing of its citizens. 1, reward officers for connecting with the community. Promote senior officers who treat all communities with respect, including communities of color. Officers' job evaluations should be tied to their success in community engagement. Patrol officers should be given more regular beats and directed to spend more time on foot rather than in squad cars. Assign officers for longer periods to specific geographical areas with the expectation that they get to know and become known by residents. Departments should be engaged with businesses, nonprofits, churches, and a wide variety of community organizations. And they should come to be seen as partners in crime reduction. Number 2, hire for diversity. Make it a top priority to hire and promote the highest quality people that represent diversity of the community and diversity across the board, including more women, Asians, Latinos, African Americans. Also, hire for diversity in life experiences. Being connected to neighborhoods, growing up either in Tacoma or cities like Tacoma. While it can be meaningful for officers to have had military experience, it's also important to hire people who can show empathy with victims of crime, who are not afraid to smile, to get out of the police car, to interact in a positive way with people, who can demonstrate emotional intelligence, who are good listeners, who have patience, who don't feel like it takes away from their authority to demonstrate kindness. Not only should we stop the militarization of our police with equipment, but we should stop hiring almost exclusively from the military to make up our civilian police organizations. Number 3, partner with activists and community groups. For too long, police organizations seem to operate with the notion that activists and community groups are the enemy. We are not. Work closely with groups across the city to connect with a network of street-smart youth mentors to identify teenagers most at risk of joining gangs or engaging in gun violence. Design opportunities for job training, counseling, financial support for young people who agree to abandon a life of crime. Work with community organizations to ensure fair treatment for all. And I want to commend some of the police officers in Tacoma who I see regularly in places like the Black Collective. But I have one caution about that. The engagement of the Tacoma police with the Black Collective, for example, is often about reporting. X has happened, Y has happened. I am yet to see any of the recommendations coming from the community enacted among our police. So, for example, with the shooting of young black men in our community in Seattle and across the nation, I personally have raised the question, what about retraining of our police officers so that they are not on the streets to kill our young black men, but they're on there to keep the peace? So, undertake new training programs and acquire non-lethal weaponry, including tasers and pepper spray, designed to minimize the use of deadly force. The gun cannot be our first choice to solve every problem on the streets of our cities. Participate in the nationwide Violence Reduction Network, and this is sponsored by the United States Department of Justice, and it promotes efforts to ensure that there is procedural justice, including focusing on the problem of unconscious bias in police interactions with the public. And now my off-the-cuff remarks. I came to Tacoma 12 years ago. And this is the part where I'm going to obey my wife and be short. One of the observations I've made is when I was asked to join the American Leadership Forum in 2007, I looked across our city and every person on the city council was white. Every person on the county council was white. Every person on the school board was white. I made one observation several years ago, and I think this white community has never forgiven me for making that observation. 83% of the teachers in Tacoma School District are white. 54% of the students are students of color. It's just a fact. And for that observation, which I made in a letter to the Tacoma News Tribune, a white person called the President of the United States, the President of the University of Puget Sound, where I work. For all I know, they call the President as well. Called the President of the University of Puget Sound and threatened to cease engagement with any university who would employ someone who would make an observation like that. The observation that this is the structure of our community. Tacoma, we have structured inequality. Our entire school board is still white. And all my friends in this community cannot say black people have not stepped forward. Cannot say black people have not offered to be part of the solution. So my short word is there are efforts in this community to make our community a community that represents all of us. I encourage you to go beyond the talk. I am part of an organization called The Conversation. 8 years. We've met every week, multiracial group, to address these questions. 8 years now in Tacoma. I lead the Race and Pedagogy Institute on the campus of the University of Puget Sound. Leads the nation in challenging educators everywhere to look at the issue of race as a significant feature of American life. America, Tacoma, we will not continue to dodge a bullet. Ferguson, Richard Rothstein, one of my favorite policy analysts, says, Ferguson was built on U.S. urban policies. Tacoma has been built on historical policies of injustice. We've got to correct them. Let's not wait for the next bullet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter Gordon. And so I do value people's time. I know if you need to leave, definitely leave. I wanted to also honor the segment for questions, and Jaire is going to be moderating that. We have our bucket back here, but I've asked Dr. Dexter Gordon to come up and also be here to answer questions as well. So how this works is we have our names down here. Jaire will pick the name, and then you can ask the question to any panelist you wish, and we'll go on from there.
All right, yes, because we are short on time, I will be able to just have a couple of the panelists answer the question. So if you like this one, please, by all means, chime in when you hear it. All right, here we go. I thought my handwriting was special. All right. And if this is your question, please chime in just a little bit more. All right. Are there workshops in the community on white privilege where people can go to learn? Whose question was that? So the question was, are there workshops in the community for people to take part and learn more? I guess they're asking about the white privilege part. Are there more?
I'm the founder of a organization called Collective Empowerment Leadership Development, where I consult with organizations and individuals who are interested in furthering these discussions and addressing white privilege as well as white superiority, and also looking at people of color and inferiority complexes and how they connect to one another. So if you're interested, I have business cards and pamphlets that can give you more ideas on some of the work that I do. And I also partner with a close friend of mine named Noah Prince, who specializes in organizing discussions about white privilege. And he also was running a group that Kit kind of talked about, bringing particularly white males together to discuss these issues and figure out ways that they could address racism from their own perspective and how they could be a part of the solution. So it's definitely.
Well, and Tasha may be able to say a little more about this, but last year, it was last year, she brought a group of trainers in under Vibrant Schools and invited it and opened it up to a lot of people in the community. It was a 2-day session called Undoing Institutional Racism. It's a group from Seattle, although for part of the time we also used Keith and his colleague Noah. But it was, if you can get to that training, I don't know when it'll be in Tacoma again next, and maybe Tasha or Keith knows, but that's a really great one for white people who sort of want to grasp the history of race as a social construct and the history of racism and how it plays out in pretty much every system in this country.
And very quickly, if you want to just Google white privilege training in Seattle, for instance, there's an organization that has a really great course on women, white privilege, and the patriarchy, not to be missed.
I also wanted to mention in Tacoma Public Schools, one of the things, I am a cultural competence trainer, but one of the things I believe is in training teachers alongside the community. So we are initiating a new set of trainings now on white privilege, and I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but if I have business cards, I have an email address. We are going to be inviting community members to join teachers. I believe our teachers often live outside the community, and they're coming into our community. So we need to build relationship, because I can talk at people for 2 hours, but it's really about that relationship building. So the whole philosophy is get people in a room together, give them a forum to have conversation and get to know one another and talk about these issues. So if you're interested, Tacoma will be we're doing a series on race right now that any of you are you can totally join that. Race, the Power of an Illusion, it's based on that film series. We're also doing cultural competence session and then also a white privilege. So if you're interested in that, Tacoma Public Schools.
All right, we have another question, and I think it's kind of like an underlying question that a lot of people ask. I'm not saying you're insensitive for asking this question. It is definitely relevant. So the question is, everyone keeps saying, how come we don't hold Mike Brown accountable for his actions? How has he not been held accountable? So I'm going to chime in on that one. First of all, he was an unarmed kid who got shot, and he didn't have a weapon. All right, so first of all, as far as rules of escalation, even in the military, if I don't have a gun, there's no way in the world the Geneva Convention is going to let you shoot me in that capacity. But as far as accountability, that's a home issue. He, as a citizen of this country, he should be able to walk down the street, even if he did act up, even if he did not listen, even if he was a knucklehead, he should still have the opportunity to learn the lesson later on that night from either his parents or some way, shape, or form, either a school official. But to get shot and to never have an opportunity to do better. We've all failed before. We've all made mistakes. And if you catch us on any given moment on a bad day, we could all probably point our fingers at ourselves. All right, so what it boils down to is that he was a kid. You don't know what you don't know, and especially at 18 years young, you don't know better. So the question was, how come he was not held accountable?
People were writing a lot of stuff on Facebook saying they're painting him as this good citizen, all this kind of stuff. How come he's not held accountable for his actions? And so I was saying I felt like the media held him accountable in a negative way, like when they released the tape, when they said he had marijuana in the system. So my thing was, where are you getting this image that we're saying he's the good guy and he's amazing and nothing should have happened to him and he wasn't held accountable? I feel like they were really trying to make it seem like he deserved what he got. So I didn't understand what people meant when they kept saying, well, why isn't he held accountable for his action? So I wasn't on the negative narrative, so.
I want to just illustrate something here about holding teenagers responsible. Many of us know the name Ray Allen. He used to play basketball here in this region. Well, in August, I think 3 weeks after Michael Brown, 3 young men were arrested in Florida. Why? They broke into Ray Allen's house. And Ray Allen wasn't there, his wife was there. She woke up and saw these 3 young men in her house, screamed for the police came and accosted the 3 young men, and guess what happened to the 3 young men? Absolutely nothing. Because these 3 young men apparently at a party found out, oh, this is Ray Allen's house. It would be cool to see what the inside of it looks like. In the middle of the night, they enter this house, but these 3 young white men were held by the police and handed over to their parents. So when we talk about holding accountable, that's what sensible police officers do. They don't kill young people for stupid action on the street. You find ways to de-escalate. So, Michael Brown, almost the same height as the police officer, a professional, trained in these kinds of issues. It's on the police officer to de-escalate the situation. So all those people who are asking for Michael Brown to be held responsible, you've already got the answer. It's a macabre way to hold somebody responsible for bad behavior by shooting them.
All right, we got time for one more question. And the next question is, what plans does Tacoma have for community policing? All right, does anyone want to chime in on that one? Who wrote that one? What plans does Tacoma have for community policing? I wrote it. Okay.
I'll give it to Keith in a second, but there was a gentleman who came in. He left. If you look up on the board, oh, he's actually right there. So it's Ryan Webster is on the board for City of Tacoma Citizens Police Policy Review Panel. So if you happen to witness something and you would like to report it, he is someone you can speak to after this, but also there's information on the board, and there are spaces that you can go and speak. I'm going to give it to Keith now.
I'm not sure what particular plans Tacoma has in terms of policing, but what I am sure is that we all have the capability to raise our voices and help Tacoma draft plans that can be conducive so that we're all safe. It's something that we all can do. We have access to the police chief, to our officers, to our city council members, to make suggestions on what we think is best. Dr. Gorton outlined what Richmond, California has done. I think that's a very good place to start with, and we could utilize that and just get more informed on what the best practices and policies are. Then we could talk to our council members and talk to our police chiefs and all our law enforcement agencies and make suggestions. But don't just stop with talking. Just keep talking. Like, don't let them think, oh, they came and they said what they needed to say and they're gone. We could stay engaged with this community and stay engaged with our police force so that we could see the change that we want.
I actually wanted to address the question earlier and respond to what Dr. Dexter Gordon said. Thinking about accountability, and I guess I'm going to challenge a little bit, if that's okay. Accountability is this, again, this idea that it comes from somebody else. It comes from the parent. It comes from the school system. It comes from a police officer. When actually, what's really important is engaging that dialogue with those people who are most directly impacted. So what I might encourage in that situation is what does that family want from that situation? And what is that youth gonna do and actively do in order to make things right? Right? And so if I would ask that question to the police force of Ferguson, what are you gonna do to make things right? Because it's not on me to fine you, to give you a $1 million sanction. That's not really doing anything, right? So it's easy. I don't know how many of you were spanked as children growing up, right? I'm like, all right, I did something wrong. I'm gonna take my licks. All right, 1, 2, 3, okay, good. All right, I'm gonna go now. I didn't actually do anything. I didn't learn anything. And so when we change the dynamic to accountability to say, what am I gonna do? I did it wrong. How can I make things better? That's a different way of thinking about accountability in a way that engages both the victim, the person most directly impacted, the community, people who witnessed it, experienced it vicariously, and also those people who were the authors of those acts, whether it's the police force or the school or the bully or whomever. And so I just want to think about these things a little bit differently, and that's I just want to respond to that, and that's. Was there somebody else saying?
And another thing as far as community involvement and speaking out, as said, we have set up forums online for you to be able to speak. So if you do witness something, if you want to share, you can always use the hashtag. You can shout out and speak. But then on top of that, we do have our Facebook page, which is set up. It's public, Race in Tacoma. And that's for anybody who wants to actually step up and do their own events. As said before by Jaire, talk to 10 people, talk to another 10 people, and you can create your own events. This happened just because I spoke to my friends and I asked them. The food that's provided, that was because I asked a friend and she was saying, what do you need? And I asked for, help with food, and she provided that. So anyone in this room and anyone in this community can actually create an event, can make waves, can do something, and be proactive. Next steps, I do want to honor all of the panelists' time, all of your time. Post-it notes. Let's put those up there, but let's keep this conversation going. Let it not end today. And when it comes to all of the people in this room, I hope this was helpful, educational, hit you in some way. But yeah, thank you very much, and you have a great night.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this police policy review panel. This is an opportunity. We've talked a lot about action here today. We've talked a lot about the doctor had some suggestions on things that the community police department can do to improve the way that they conduct business. This is a panel and a meeting that is open to the public. It is announced on the city's webpage what the agenda is. There's also always opportunity for people to comment. So there's always an opportunity to comment specifically with regard to police policy. And it's a good opportunity for folks who have some issues they want to bring forth and have be considered. The panel meets to review some of these issues, to review contemporary issues, to make suggestions to the city manager's office and to recommendations to the city council on ways to adopt statutory, or in this case, ordinance changes or policy changes on how they conduct police business. So if you have a interest in this, there are occasionally positions open that are announced on the city website. Please apply for those. But until then, I encourage you to attend one of our meetings as announced on the website. Please provide some of your questions and comments at that time. The public disclosure laws are in citizens' favor, and if you want to know what the police policy is with regard to escalation or the use of force, you are more than free to ask for that information, and it will be provided to you. So this is a very good opportunity for folks who are interested in continuing this on an action basis to get involved. I think it's a very good outlet. So I appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you for that information, and thanks again for all of the panelists.